So here's an example of a male with a kind of a strange ornament. It looks like there's a pear embedded in the neck of this prairie chicken, but actually it's this pouch of skin, of bright colored skin, that is irresistible to females. Um, Naturalists in the Victorian era, when Darwin first proposed the idea of natural selection, looked kind of skeptically at ornaments like this, wondering, why would it that natural selection would favor this kind of mating system? And it wasn't that they didn't understand why males should have these ornaments. I mean, it's pretty obvious why males had exaggerated ornaments. It's because they're attracted to females. Males that have these pouches hanging off of their necks get more opportunities to mate. The real puzzle that biologists had to solve with these ornaments is why on earth would a female be attracted to a male with giant pear-shaped pouches coming off of his neck? Why would natural selection favor females that have a preference for these outrageous ornaments? There are a number of different possible answers. One possible answer is what's called Fisherian runaway selection. This is also known as the sexy sons hypothesis. Okay, and this one's a little bit tricky, so bear with me, pay close attention, because it's a bit complicated. What Fisherian runaway selection hypothesizes is that the first thing that happens, basically, is that for some reason or no reason, females in a particular population evolve a preference for a particular trait. In the case of the prairie chicken, let's suppose that a few females in a population of prairie chicken developed a hankering for males with weird ornaments on the sides of their necks. Okay, what's going to happen when females and males in that population come together to mate? Let's suppose that there are just a few males that have the ornament and a few females that are attracted to that ornament. Well, most of the females in the population, these birds, aren't going to prefer the bird with this trait, but they aren't going to prefer the other birds either. They're going to be just kind of neutral with respect to it. And so you could imagine that, any of these birds might choose any one of these males with equal probability. That means that when it comes to these birds that do not have the preference for the ornamented bird and the unornamented bird fare equally well in terms of their number of mating opportunities. They're just as successful as one another. However, if there are females in a population that favor this particular ornament, they are more likely than not going to mate with that male. Okay, so you've got females that prefer a particular trait mating with males that have a particular trait. This is important. You end up getting females that prefer an ornament getting together with males that have that ornament. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But what's going to happen in terms of the mating success of all the different males? Well, when it comes to the females that don't have a preference for the ornament, as I said, all the males are going to do equally well. But because there are some females that prefer this male over all the others, a male with the ornament overall is going to have higher access to mating opportunities. And so this individual is going to have more offspring. Now, to understand why this is runaway selection, what we need to think about is, what are the genes of these individuals going to be like? And mind you, they may be, some of these are going to be male, some of them are going to be female. But they're going to have actually two different features. One of them is really obvious, it's shown here. The sons of this ornamented male are also going to inherit that ornament. But they're going to inherit something else. All of his offspring are going to inherit something else. They're going to inherit the trait that is expressed in females of being attracted to males with this ornament. Okay, so what you're doing is there's a particular kind of bird that is going to be increasing in frequency in this population because these individuals get to mate more often than average, there are going to be these increasing numbers of birds that have both the genes for making the trait and the genes for preferring that trait. The genes for making the trait get expressed in males. The genes for preferring the trait get expressed in females. Okay? So you end up having females that don't care about the trait, mate with whatever male, and they have a certain number of offspring. But because females that prefer the trait are mating with the most successful males in the population, they end up having more daughters that prefer the trait. In other words, the allele for the preference ends up being associated with the allele for the preferred trait. And as the allele for the ornament becomes more frequent in the population, the allele that codes for the preference for the ornament becomes more frequent in the population. Because the allele that makes birds prefer the trait is becoming more frequent, that favors the trait even more. So that places selection will end up favoring that particular trait, the ornament. And because that's more common, that favors the preference for the ornament. And you go around and around and around. This runaway process can just keep going until finally the ornament is so exaggerated that the ecological selection, actually stops it from getting any more elaborate or complicated. So basically, selection for the trait causes more selection for the trait, and it'll just keep on and keep on increasing until the ornament is just way too costly, and then selection will call it to, or will bring that process to a halt. Okay, that's pretty weird, but it does seem to that hypothesis does seem to explain in many cases why females prefer some of these outrageous ornaments. A preference for the ornament, just in a little bit of the ornament, a preference for say maybe white or yellow spots on the side of the neck got started, and then it kind of snowballed from there until females were really responding to big yellow spots on the side of the neck, and then even bigger yellow spots. And finally, what they would really love to see is a male with these gigantic throat pouches. But the throat pouches are so expensive to make, that males can't sustain it. So they end up just having these little throat pouches and everything. That's when Fisherian runaway selection stops.